Now imagine yourself saying this prayer that you're standing up and you're facing the dawn. And you're praying in the silence. And it's just you and the dawn. Give to me this day a clear and watchful eye. Give to me this day a firm and gentle touch. Give to me this day a good and receptive ear. Give to me this day a clean, discerning taste. Give to me this day a subtle sense of smell. Give to me this day an openness of heart. Give to me this day an awareness now of you. What a lovely prayer. Good morning. Welcome back. Who hasn't been with us before? We have newbies. Welcome, newbies.
Unless you can call Egypt in 99, the very beginning, I went.
Egypt in 99? And you haven't aged at all. Well, you are not an official newbie. You're a new, but not a bee. Okay, well, welcome to all of you. This is going to be a very interesting workshop. This workshop has a theme, and the theme that Lynn and and let me introduce to you, everybody knows Lynn Bell. Wonderful Lynn Bell. It's a real privilege to teach this workshop with Lynn. It's always a privilege to teach with her. As all of you know, she's an absolute genius in many areas, and certainly her expertise in astrology, I think, is beyond anybody's. But, Lynn and I have spent so much time talking about how to position this workshop because this topic is so rich and the times we are living in are so complex. More than, in my opinion, and this is the doorway I want to go in for me, and then she's going to pick up from her language and then my language, and the drawing that I use to kind of position us visually that I like to use now is just this simple idea of a building that we all live in, that you live. We all have a building. And I like the idea because it works so simply and so effectively, is that you are a building. And every floor you live on gives you a perspective, a different perspective of the world you live in. It's as simple as that. And the building, the building, never changes, but as you ascend on your floors, you see your entire world differently. But as you go up, every new floor costs a lot more money to live on. That's just the way it really is. Okay? And the rent is higher, the mortgage is higher, but you cease to hear the outside world. Your physical senses become less and less adept as you go higher. And that's just a fact in an apartment building. I mean, I had a really interesting experience. I went into a friend of mine lives in a rooftop apartment in New York. It was the first time I went into a rooftop apartment. And so we go up there, and I could not hear all the commotion and kerfuffle on the ground in Manhattan, and there's a lot, as you know. And it was quiet. And from all that endless summer honking and screaming, which is nonstop down there, and just the intense psychic jackets you wear in New York. the psychic clothing, this kind of thing. And when you walk down the street, you're always being bumped in New York. It's not like that in Chicago, but it is in New York. And then you come up there and it's all of a sudden quiet. It was phenomenal. You feel your senses, and this goes. Okay, that's what I'm talking to you about here. And as you ascend in your building, this is about your capacity to see, perceive, think, about consciousness, about what is reality. What is your reality? How do I want to perceive reality differently? How do I want to interpret what I see? How much truth do I want to see as you go higher and higher and higher? And as you know, with every floor, your neighbors cease to want to talk to you. Because as you come down, you want to report in, you should see the view. You won't believe how beautiful the world looks from up here. Why, I can see mountains, and you won't believe it. But beyond the smog, there's absolutely clear skies. But if you live under the smog line, are you really interested in someone bragging about clear skies and fresh air when you can't afford to live that high? It's in your best interest to say such a world doesn't exist. Or to tell that person, I'm not sure I want to see you again. Clang, the door slams in your face. So it's often the case that when a person gets up to this level and realizes, oh my God, this view is unbelievable. Oh my God, nobody's going to believe this. A clarity of consciousness that oftentimes a person makes the decision, I can't afford this floor. I'm getting out of here. And they come back below the smog line and they decide, I'm going to stay here. I can't afford that altitude. I can't afford to live that high. I can't afford the rent. I can't afford to be without my neighbors. I think I'll stay here. This is as far as I go. Because this, and when the mystics spoke about, this journey is very costly. This journey is very painful. This is what they were talking about, is that as a person ascends, there is a dynamic that occurs, a switch, a transition in which the personal becomes the impersonal and the impersonal becomes the personal. Now that doesn't intellectually make as much sense as it does experientially. And that's that somewhere in this area, an experience inside of you, in what Teresa would call the fourth mansion, happens in which your heart is unlocked, and you do not have the key for this lock. You do not have that. Something cosmic, something spiritual has that. And when that lock is when it's unlocked, the love you have for the whole takes over the love you have for the one. The impersonal quality of love becomes the most profound sense of inner intimacy. It is not explainable because it's so vague and untouchable, unreachable. And to people on the lower level, it is the most preposterous goal. Who would want that for a goal? Who could conceive of such a goal? You couldn't conceive of such a goal. And, as Muktananda would say, don't put your foot on that path. It's better if you don't, but if you do, stay on it. It is a goal that costs everything, but when you get it, there's nothing that equals it, because there is no way of explaining the unexplainable. There isn't any. That is what is the ecstasy that goes with this. That is the archetypal realm is a part of the realization that this world is a physical expression of something so profound that it is a caboose on a huge train, but not the engine. That when you live as though this physical world is the engine, that is the source of suffering. That is the source of suffering. That is the source of every foolish decision. That's the source of, and here's the word we're going to have a theme around, being held hostage. So one of the major theme of our weekend is what is holding you hostage. So we're going to introduce an archetype this weekend called the Resource Archetype. The archetype in your chart from which you draw the resource from within you that helps you navigate through a challenge in you. Well, and we of course have already outlined the challenges, but whether it's a collision challenge, a collision between you and a significant other, you and an obstacle. Do I sell this place? I'm having a collision of power with somebody. I'm having a collision of forces in my life, a collision of beliefs between me and somebody, or a collision of ethics between myself and where I work, a power collision. One of your archetypes is a significant resource that becomes the one you navigate with. And understanding this is a high altitude one. Why? Because this is your symbolic way of thinking. It's not your literal world, and I've got to keep you up here. What entrapment is in our class is to go down here, look for and think literally, which is a first floor way of thinking. And if you go for a literal interpretation only, you'll get entrapped in your fears. The resource is about, well, Lynn and I will talk about that later. We'll get to that later. It's important for me to just give a larger overview right now of why learning to think this way is such an asset and such a tool. And that's that I've said this before, and I've said this in many of my lectures, because it's become so important. It's become so important for me to carry a message like this that I cannot not say it. And that's that I really do believe deep in my soul, that we are living at truly an axial shift in human in the human journey, an axial shift, not just a time of chaos or a time of change. Those words no longer can contain what this time in human evolution is about. These are big words to use. These are huge words to use. They're so huge that if we actually understood the power in these words, we would be on the floor gasping for breath. But we listen to them as if I'm reading you a Grimm's fairy tale, because they're like a fairy tale for us. I could be reading you if I read you a stock report that threatened a stock fall, your heart would be palpitating. And I'm talking to you about a transformation of the whole of the human journey, and there's not even a rise in your blood pressure. That's how not real it is. It's not real. It's like a fairy tale. And yet we are living through, depending on that, historians will write about this time and wonder why we were so not aware of it, so unawake, so self-focused, that we did not realize half our species were dying, that our air was contaminated, that half the aquatic kingdom was drinking oil and radiation while we slept. And we were eating from that and telling ourselves it was fresh fish, because we just make up things in our head all the time. We decide that if we get it from this part of the ocean, it's fine. We just tell ourselves whatever we want. Well, this is farm grown. And so what do you think that water comes from? It's full of meds from the society that puts it all in the toilet. And it goes into the rivers. It's drugged. That could have PMS medicine in it, you idiot. There is nothing that is pure anymore. Okay. But you could have a fish that just took a Xanax, for all you. I mean, really? Okay. So what's wrong with this fish? Okay. Okay. I mean, let's face it, folks. There's a lot in your drinking water. But in all truth, this really is a time of what I would call the most profound time in the human journey. So, I think that what I'm saying will be matched by what Lynn will say in terms of what's happening in the heavens. And I think that every single person is feeling it in some way. I think that we are seeing it in the changing patterns in our society, in ways that our social climate, our economic climate, is one way of measuring how people are changing around us, how there's a rise in madness, how there's a rise in archetypes that we thought were long put to sleep. The pirate, for example. Now there's pirates in Somalia, there's pirates everywhere, but the pirating on the internet is everywhere. The pirate has reawakened. The barbarian has come back in full force with barbaric acts just in that shopping plaza in Kenya, chopping off body parts and hanging people, and these insane acts of barbarism that can happen anywhere now. But all of them, archetypally, you have to come up here to be able to understand now what's happening down here. if you look at the insanity of action only from the first floor, all you will ever say is those people are just awful. And you'll never understand that, in fact, what's happening to the collective is that everyone can feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. Everyone, all of these acts of insanity, from what's happening in our country in the Congress, and their inability, what you're witnessing is an inability to run a great nation. They simply do not know how to run a great nation anymore. The problems have outgrown their capacity to manage. Their personalities are so inadequate to the size of the challenge. This is not about parties. This is about statesmanship. And the size of the catastrophe versus the maturity of the leadership. What we're looking at is this feeling that we are on the brink. We're living on the edge. We're living on the brink. And we can feel it. We absolutely can feel it. What we are looking at is that we can sense that there's something in the air about survival. How are we going to survive? Because at the root of everybody's fundamental questions these days is survival. How do we chart survival? And nobody's sure. Nobody is sure. Courses of survival used to be fairly clear. Fairly clear. But let me take you back and make something, point something out. And that's that we who were born in the nuclear generation from World War II on, we are the only human beings who have grown up in the nuclear age. We have been shaped by forces that never existed before. We are living archetypally, the myth, a reawakening of a myth, archetypally, that was not active for thousands of years. And that's the myth of Pandora. We, Prometheus, the United States, stole the fire from Zeus once again. And ever since then, we've been living in a world looking for who has the fire. Does this country have the nuclear fire? Does that one have the fire? Does this one have the fire? Does that? And gradually, the holder of the fire has gone from great big huge US and great big huge Soviet Union in the Cold War days to smaller countries, smaller, and now we fear in the hands of the individual terrorist. Now we can't control who has the fire. This is Pandora's box in nuclear style. And ever since entering the nuclear age, the two fundamental wheels that are the guardians of human nature, that drive human nature, which is the instinct to create and the instinct to survive. These have always, since the very moment we've been born, even in animals, the instinct to creatively find a way to survive. These are the wheels of evolution. Since entering the nuclear age, we have doubted we will survive. We have not been sure. As children, the nuns put us under our desks for nuclear, what do you call those things? Bomb drills or whatever it was. I can't even remember what the air raid drills are. Yeah. Is that what they were called? Air raid drills? Duck and cover. And duct tape around windows, should there be. I mean, the stupidity of these people is not measurable by any calculation. They are what I call white men stupid. Okay? And you know why? Because they never think they're stupid. And look at Congress. I mean, really. And that's the last thing I'll say. Really, I promise you, I won't say anything else. But from the time we entered the nuclear age, every single theme has been, we might not make it. And as a result, what people were creating went from being with the idea of longevity to it doesn't matter how long, just make it quick. And you don't make it with pride anymore, you make it with profit. Profit took over pride. Mass market, and it doesn't matter if it's going to last. It doesn't matter. And this filtered in to our morality and into our ethics. Doesn't matter how long your word is good for. Oh, what the heck? Well, I just meant it for a while. Whether it's your vows or fidelity or whatever, it doesn't matter. Now you have to understand that this level, if you can read history, if you can read how this evolutionary thread filtered in, took hold, reconstructed the soul of humanity. And I am so just giving you a drop on your tongue of the gallons of how deeply I know this. You would begin to grasp why the madness that is happening is because humanity has fundamentally morphed its own capacity to sense its way through survival. Because it senses, I don't know if I'm going to survive. And it has morphed its own moral code. It has morphed its own ethical code. It has morphed its survival instincts in the way of surviving within a supportive community of humanity. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Whereas before it had this sense of surviving within a community of humanity, now it's like we better build survival communities. How do we do that? How do we survive with each other? Before that was instinctive. Now you have to do a manual. How do we survive with each other? Can you imagine that? We now have to read about how to cooperate and survive with each other. That's how far asunder we have gone. And this is what I'm talking to you about. So that when we come to these crossroads of how do I survive, part of what you have to factor in with yourself is the question of, am I separated from the whole? Have I separated myself and told and really pulled myself out in such a way that I have communitized, I made that up, myself in such a way that I've morphed myself. And I have to replug myself in to a functioning community system. I mean, who am I? What part of the whole? Am I part of the whole? One of the laws of life, when people, in fact, ask me, like, what is the nature of God? For me, the nature of God is this: law, period, law. Laws. I don't go with this schmaltzy love, God loves you. What are you talking about? Stop with that. Stop. You don't even know what that means, and it doesn't mean anything to you. If it really meant something to you, you wouldn't have to be told that, because you would be embraced by that. It doesn't mean anything to you, so never use that language again. It's nothing but child stuff, and it doesn't mean anything. If you want to understand the nature of God, you begin with what does mean something to you, and that is law and order. Period. You loathe chaos, and you loathe being ordinary. Start with what you loathe and work your way out of it, and you'll discover the nature of God. You loathe chaos, and you despise the fact that the idea of being ordinary. So start with, you are ordinary. You're as ordinary as mud. Number 2, laws. They rule the ordinary. Period. Laws are consistent. You break the law, you pay for it. Nobody, there are no exceptions to it. Rich, poor, short, tall. That's the nature of God. You put poison in your body, you will vomit. Because your body is subject to law. Biology, law. Physiology, law. Gravity, I don't care who you are, jump off the building, you will fall. You are subject to law. Those are physical laws. Disease, subject to law. If this were not true, you couldn't find medicine. Study the disease, learn its nature, create medicine. Learn the laws of the disease. This is how it behaves. Tides, law. This is why astrology is so brilliant. It is the laws of the cosmos speaking to us through planets and cycles. Law. Now, those laws also move into the psychic field, the psyche, the subtle forms. They manage the soul. They manage the psyche. They manage the mythologies. You sway too much out of balance, Taoism, and the law. You've got to go in the other way. It's as simple as that. A society goes too much and overspends, it will go into debt. Debt causes a crisis. This is not a big deal. Figure it out. Crisis causes panic. Panic causes this. That's the way it is. And it brings out certain archetypes. It brings out warriors, barbarians, and weapons. It's archetypal. Know the archetypes. You can count on it. That's what started the Nazi Party. This is what historically, you can count on these things. You can just count on it. Know history. Know it, know it, know it. And know yourself. Because you will know what archetypes in you will rise under certain circumstances. Never tell yourself you're not ordinary. Because under ordinary circumstances, when they become extraordinary, you will behave exactly like a screaming mob. So don't ever reward yourself for being conscious. Why? Because I don't see you glowing, Buddha. The best thing you can do is treat yourself like, okay, I'm dealing with exactly these things. The deeper I learn myself and what's going on now, these are the pressure points in the cosmos. Are you with me here?